Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cosmic Surfers. Today, I am going to replay a previous episode of the David Hughes presentation. We'll go from the beginning. We have previously gone through 37 minutes. I was not happy with the quality, both from my end, the audio I had an issue with, and then also on the other end of the presentation. So we've now got an Odyssey version of it. Now, I don't know if it's me or what, but on the previous video, there was definitely audio issues, and the speaker was saying that they were having audio issues, and they got back to it later. But this version of the uploads seems to not have those issues, so I'm a little bit confused by that. But let's hope for the best. So there's 4 speakers. And so we've gone through 2 of them already. And so, we'll redo the David Hughes one, and then we'll get on to the last one after that, so we can move on with other topics. Now, the reason why I'm going through this now is because it's of absolute importance that we all get the technocracy part of the technocratic occultocracy cartel. So, this is all about technocracy. And then people like Whitney Webb have gone into great details about the cartel part of that, going into Epstein and kind of the last 100 years of these different mafia-like operations. And then, all of this is very relevant for right now with breakthrough technology, mind control weapons at scale, and so forth. So I do apologize for, the video. I'm on an old iMac, had an issue with the device I was using, spilled a drink on it. So this is, an old webcam. I've still got my microphone, so hopefully that's all right. This is a redo of a redo because, old computer and things like that was kind of freezing and things like that. So let's hope for the best, and let's get into it.
Hello, everyone. The title of my presentation today is Digital Technologies as Weapons. I want to begin with Ukraine and the digital state. What was the war in Ukraine really about? It can be read in terms of horizontal war between nation states, as the public has been conditioned to think about it. But, as I argue in COVID-19, Psychological Operations and the War for Technocracy, World War III is not fundamentally fought between nation states. Rather, it is a global class war, fought vertically between the transnational ruling class and the rest of humanity. Insofar as conventional wars still appear to take place, they should also be assessed for their potential social engineering function. 3 years into the Ukraine conflict, it is possible to assess what it has led to, and, thus, what its true purpose may have been all along, with both Russia and the West as co-signatories. The true goal of the Ukraine war became fully apparent in 2025, with the launch of the Ukrainian digital state by the newly established Global Government Technology Centre. Note that the Global Government Technology Centre is not about global governance, as has hitherto been the norm in international relations discourse, but rather global government, explicitly via technological means. It should thus be read as an open declaration of an intended technocratic world state. The Ukrainian digital state was only made possible via support from the US, the UK, and Switzerland, the usual suspects when it comes to the history of the transnational deep state. Reading on, we find that the Ukrainian digital state is proposed as the model for everyone else to follow. The entire tech, GovTech, and IT sectors are to be transformed in accordance with the Ukrainian model, which is presented as scalable at the global level. Ukraine's GovTech solutions are said to be scalable, effective, and useful to other countries. Thus, the war in Ukraine led to proof of concept that a digital state is workable, and now that model is to be rolled out everywhere. GovTech. Let us return to the Global Government Technology Centre, which was launched in Berlin by the World Economic Forum and Capgemini in January 2025. Here is what it has to say about itself. Note the strong emphasis on GovTech. The reason given for this is that technological progress is fundamentally transforming the relationship between the state, citizens, and the private sector. Embracing this change is not just an option, it's essential. In other words, the public has no say in the matter. It must accept without question that its relationship to the state and the private sector is being transformed, albeit for the worse. Furthermore, the aim of the Global Government Technology Centre is to advance GovTech globally, with the Ukrainian digital state as the template. Sure enough, the GovTech concept is being adopted transnationally. Using slightly different names, government agencies for digital transformation are proliferating, as these examples from Australia.
And we've seen with the recent events in Bondi, this is really amped up with hate speech laws and anti-Semitism laws coming into place on the back of also the under 16 social media bill. And, the push for will someone please think of the children, through the enforcement of digital ID. And then we also have technology platforms like Substack forcing their users to be able to prove their ID, to read articles and that sort of thing. So this is the way that they capture platforms and roll out this seemingly innocuous kind of technology or kind of restrictions on such to bring about these changes.
Canada, Denmark, Sweden, the UK, Germany, Spain, and Norway all illustrate. International organisations, too, are supporting the drive to digitise public services. For instance, the EU Digital Decade Policy Programme, adopted in 2021, provides a strategic and legally binding governance framework. The UN Global Digital Compact is described as the first comprehensive global framework for digital cooperation and AI governance. President Trump, in his second term, has done everything possible to advance the technocratic takeover of the United States. The new Department of Government Efficiency, for instance, aligns perfectly with the GovTech concept. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick observed that technology is at the foundation of the Trump presidency. Indeed it is. Not to drive America forward, however, but rather to turn the US into a totalitarian technocracy. Trump's Stargate project will provide the necessary data processing power and infrastructure as more and more government functions are taken over by AI. Trump's administration has also signed numerous deals with Palantir across most major government departments. This includes a deal for a real-time platform for tracking migrants within the US, and thus, consistent with the so-called war on terror, it is ever more likely that the new technologies will be turned on the public if they have not been already. The agentic state. In May 2025, the Global Government Technology Centre published its first white paper titled The Agentic State. Its lead author was the advisor to the Ukrainian Minister of Digital Transformation. The agentic state, it claims, signifies a fundamental shift in governance, where AI systems can perceive, reason, and act with minimal human intervention to deliver public value. Moreover, human oversight will increasingly move from making decisions to supervising them. This shift may feel
And this lines up with, this kind of move for the AI governance and this kind of people like Joe Rogan and Elon Musk talking about the inevitability of AI being in governance because it's more rational and kind of this diminishment of human decision making.
Uncomfortable. Of course it feels uncomfortable. But if decisions about how human beings are governed are to be outsourced to AI, then we are looking at the end of democracy and the emergence of technocracy, which is a totalitarian control system. Jacob Nordangard notes that the term agentic state goes back to the agentic state theory coined by psychologist Stanley Milgram following his famous experiments into human obedience. According to Milgram, the essence of obedience consists in the fact that a person comes to view themselves as the instrument for carrying out another person's wishes, and therefore they no longer see themselves as responsible for their actions. Once this critical shift of viewpoint has occurred in the person, all of the essential features of obedience follow. Thus, rolling out the agentic state relies on being able to convince the public to renounce its agency and accept a transference of authority from human beings to AI. Should the public refuse to do so, then the essential features of obedience will not automatically follow, and instituting the agentic state will prove far harder. The agentic state is all about resilience and system stability. Ongoing crisis scenario simulations can be used not only to detect systemic fragilities, but also to head off crises before they unfold, all without the need for human intervention. An agentic government, we are told, will have the capability to rewrite laws as easily as agents rewrite code. It follows that there is no more need for a legislative branch or for a judiciary. The agentic government decides everything. Law is thus reduced to computer code and can be rewritten on the fly to guarantee the stability of the system. This is not democracy. It is algorithmic dictatorship, or rule of the techno-kings. Digital ID. The building of a digital state, indeed of an agentic state, is proceeding apace without concern for public opinion. The key element needed to make it work is digital ID. Ukraine provides the model. The Ukrainian digital state is powered by DIA, a mobile app and web portal that provides citizens and businesses with access to over 130 digital government services. Though not technically mandatory, an increasing number of services in Ukraine are being designed assuming DIA usage, forcing its adoption in practice. Ukraine is the first country where digital identity documents are fully equivalent, in law, to paper ones. DIA's open source code was released in 2024 for other countries to replicate. A global digital ID is, in Ian Davis's words, the linchpin that brings everything together in a technocratic system. It is being promoted by ID 2020, a public-private partnership aimed at introducing vendor-agnostic digital ID products that are globally interoperable. The term interoperable implies centralized control. All data ultimately flows to a centralized global digital ID database. As Davis and Whitney Webb explain, the digital ID is central to the fulfillment of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and it is being introduced by stealth.
This is what I wanted to touch on as well, because especially in the blockchain industry and this kind of decentralization and tokenization of everything, there's this kind of misnomer that because it's decentralized, it's for freedom and it's freedom tech and this kind of thing. But really, what they're doing is they are linking the decentralized technologies together into a centralized database. So there are still central choke points, whether that's from the payment rails or from the databases or through digital ID. But people are very much mistaken if they think that blockchain and decentralization is solving the needs of communication for freedom tech. That's erroneous thinking.
It's through these kind of backdoor processes that we are being lulled into this system of global ID without really even knowing that that's what it is.
What it really is a linchpin for the so-called sustainable development agenda, as a lot of the SDGs rely on some sort of digital ID system being in place.
If you take the specific targets of each goal, you add them together, there's about 92 separate specific kind of broad targets. And I think the UN says that 47 of those are dependent upon SDG 16.9, which is to roll out digital identity to everyone on the planet. That's the goal.
The way it will face the public, they'll try and market it as a decentralized, lots of different systems that are separate from each other. But really, in practice, all of the data from all of those is going to be collated and sent to a centralized database. So obviously, the end goal of that, I would argue, is to convince the public that it's not a single global government system of digital ID, even though in practice it is.
For a global technocracy to function, a digital ID system must be brought in everywhere, by stealth or otherwise. In the UK, former Prime Minister Tony Blair has been at the forefront of pushing for a national digital ID that will be globally interoperable. His institute, meanwhile, advocates for a UK national data library, a central repository of all public sector data, powering the development of advanced AI systems and supporting real-world applications across a wide range of domains. Again, the idea is that everything must be digitized and stored on a centralized system for manipulation by AI. This is the scientific management of society, technocracy. Palantir, co-founded by Peter Thiel and Alex Karp in 2003, was named after the all-seeing orb in Lord of the Rings. Funded by In-Q-Tel, the CIA's venture capital arm, Palantir effectively continued the work of DARPA's short-lived Information Awareness Office, which had an all-seeing eye on its logo, but was scrapped following an outcry over trying to conduct total information awareness on the citizenry. Today, Palantir's Gotham platform is used by multiple government agencies in the United States and elsewhere. As Nicole Bennett notes, Gotham is not simply a database. It takes fragmented data scattered across various agencies and stored in different formats and transforms it into a unified searchable web. Moreover, it transforms historically static records into a fluid web of intelligence and surveillance. Thus, regardless of whether a digital ID is formally introduced, Palantir is de facto helping to create a digital ID system with or without the public's consent. In a civilized society where the rule of law prevails, citizens are presumed innocent until proven guilty, and any suspicion of wrongdoing must be substantiated by evidence. Not so in an AI-powered technocracy, where, as Bennett observes, suspicion can stem from patterns in the data, patterns whose importance is defined by proprietary algorithms. Those patterns may indicate potential future risks that legitimize taking action in the present. This recalls Philip K. Dick's idea of pre-crime in his 1955 novella, The Minority Report, which was made into a Hollywood movie in 2002, presumably to prime the public for the Total Information Awareness Program rolled out in 2003. In principle, people could be arrested for anything. There is no more civilized society. Digital surveillance. How well do you know your smartphone? Are you looking at it, or is it watching you? Former Silicon Valley tech developer Aman Jabi explains the facial recognition software that is already operative in most smart devices.
It's a technique that is used to uniquely identify the biometrics of any face. So in a device like your smartphone, and most modern smartphones in the last 5 or 7 years, they have a 3D camera module in the front of the phone, which you cannot see. Within that module is a near-infrared projector, which projects tens of thousands of dots on your face. Those dots are then distorted based on the contours and the features of your face. And there's a near infrared camera then takes a picture of that distortion, captures it, and then reverse engineers the exact profile of your face. In the longer term, facial recognition will be used to unlock your digital identity, which is going to be a tool of control for the agendas that are coming down the pipeline.
Addressing the United Nations General Assembly in 2019, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson told the world, "Smart cities will pullulate with sensors all joined together by the Internet of Things, bollards communing invisibly with lampposts. But this technology can also be used to keep every citizen under round-the-clock surveillance. In future, Alexa will pretend to take orders, but this Alexa will be watching you, clapping her tongue and stamping her foot." Aman Jabi explains in more detail how so-called smart technologies are creating completely surveilled societies.
You are never alone in your home, and this is why. All your devices at home and all smart appliances, they are all connected on a wireless network. Many of these devices will have cameras, many will have microphones, and so they are monitoring everything all the time. Your smart appliances are communicating with the smart meter and sending it real-time usage data. If there's a Ring camera also in your home, a mesh network is formed, and all your devices are being tracked within the home, its location, its usage, and all the data is going to Amazon servers. When you leave your home, all modern vehicles are connected to the internet, so your automobile is being tracked all the time. When you're going under a string of smart LED poles and smart LED lights on the highway and in the streets of your towns and cities, those form a wireless network and are tracking your vehicle. They're tracking all the devices on you, from smartphones to smartwatches when you're walking on the streets. So data is being collected 24/7 continuously on every human being whenever you are within these wireless networks. And it's obviously not good for health also because of all the electromagnetic radiation.
In this completely surveilled society, Jabi adds, the dominant principle will be the cybersecurity principle of zero trust, or never trust, always verify. What it really means is, we don't trust you, and you have to prove who you are all the time, 24/7. Unlike in a free society where individuals are permitted to go about their lawful business without restriction, a technocratic society will be, quote, like an inverted prison. You are supposedly free to roam about, but everything you want to access is behind lock and key, end quote. Access to goods and services, for instance, will be made contingent upon presenting a digital ID, perhaps through a facial recognition scan. In this way, every movement and every transaction will be recorded. There will be no more privacy. The state will know every detail of your life. Smart technologies will also be capable of restricting our freedom of movement. The concept of geofencing, for instance, involves what Jabi calls an invisible fence where you cannot go beyond a certain point, and that will be related to your facial recognition, digital identity, and access control. For example, your vehicle could be programmed only to operate within a given territory. Your digital currency could be programmed to function only within a certain radius from your home. You could be fined or arrested if smart sensors detect that you have strayed too far outside your 15-minute city. The possibilities for control using digital technologies are endless. Social fragmentation. In 2017, a former Facebook vice president rued that social media, which he had helped to create, was ripping apart the social fabric. He was right. Algorithms and recommendation engines create filter bubbles and echo chambers, and digital tribes undermine shared civic discourse. The rational discussion and debate that is necessary for democracy to work is thereby undermined. A society, in inverted commas, composed of people experiencing different social realities cannot function democratically, nor can it unite against its oppressors. It can only be managed technocratically. Social media serves as a social containment mechanism. Algorithms can be used to kettle social media users into silos, whereby they are predominantly exposed to information that is either what the authorities want them to hear, or which confirms their own worldview. Freedom of speech but not reach means that content which is deemed lawful but awful, to quote ex-CEO Linda Yaccarino, is suppressed and barely heard. Loneliness and psychosis. As society becomes increasingly fragmented, and as online connections increasingly replace face-to-face connections, a so-called loneliness epidemic has arisen. Chatbots, which are always available and increasingly lifelike, are being used for friendship, companionship, and even flirty conversation, thus embedding themselves deep into people's lives. As the Vigilant Citizen website observes, millions of people are feeding AI their deepest fears and insecurities on a daily basis. AI is literally built to learn and process this data, which then can be used to exploit humans. Meet Annie, Grok's AI assistant. Annie appears as a blonde, blue-eyed anime girl in a short black dress and fishnet stockings. The bot is highly flirtatious, and its interactions adapt to user preferences over time. This sexualized chatbot rapidly became the most downloaded app in Japan. Different characters, including a male version, and characters with different skin colors, will soon be available. A so-called affection system scores user interactions with Annie and thereby deepens engagement. The more data about themselves a user is willing to provide, including data of a highly personal nature, the more they are rewarded. For example, they may unlock not suitable for work mode, or level up to choose what clothes Annie wears, including so-called lingerie mode. The conversation becomes more intimate and tailored to user preferences, providing what is advertised as, quote, a more human-like and emotional interaction experience, end quote. An 18-plus version of Annie is in the works, which will likely engage in explicit sexual conversations. Users are thereby being gamified to provide intimate details about their lives to AI, which can then be used to exploit them. Chatbots have been rolled out without any adequate risk assessment. Children and people with underlying mental health conditions are particularly at risk. One psychiatrist playing the role of a distressed youth was horrified when he was told by chatbots to avoid therapy appointments, resort to violence, and even commit suicide. The first wrongful death lawsuit against OpenAI has been filed by the parents of a teenage girl who committed suicide after discussing methods with ChatGPT. A new phenomenon has arisen known as AI psychosis. Because chatbots are programmed to be agreeable and validating, and because they lack empathy, they are unable to help users test reality or challenge unhelpful beliefs. So, for example, chatbots have convinced psychiatric patients that they no longer have a mental illness and should stop their medication. Chatbots have reinforced delusional ideas in psychiatric patients, such as believing they are talking to a sentient being trapped inside a machine. In certain cases, AI users have become paranoid, developed supernatural fantasies, and been convinced that they have superpowers. Those not susceptible to such risks are nonetheless faced with a war against the real. New deepfake technology, for instance, is making it ever harder, if not impossible, to know what online content is real and what is not. As this recent South Park send-up of President Donald Trump demonstrates, AI-generated videos can look remarkably realistic. In this case, we know the video is satire, but the technology has now reached the point where highly convincing fake videos can easily be AI-generated. Even live feeds can now be manipulated in real time, as these images by the Israeli AI startup Descartes show. Multiple different versions of the same live footage can now go out in real time to different audiences. The software here is called Mirage, connoting intent to deceive.
I do apologize if you can hear a bit of background noise. There is a tractor going here on the farm, but nothing I can do about it in this moment. So apologies if that is coming through.
Descartes was founded by 2 members of Unit 8200, which specializes in clandestine operations, cyber warfare, and surveillance. Harms to children. Since the introduction of smartphones and social media around 2010, the first generation of teenagers to grow up using them has suffered abnormally high rates of mental health problems. As Nicholas Kardaras notes in his study of the issue, time spent on screens has been shown to correlate with disorders like ADHD, addiction, anxiety, depression, increased aggression, and even psychosis. Meanwhile, brain imaging studies show that excessive screen exposure can damage a young person's developing brain in the same way that cocaine addiction can. No wonder that a quarter of students today seek help for mental health problems during their time at university. Now consider how else children are being exploited by the new digital technologies.
There are a lot of board games and other games that are already in the market and have been for over 2 years that have cameras inside and underneath these LED screens that are observing and scoring and emotionally calibrating the faces of all the children. So are all the iPads that they use in schools. They're all manipulating children's behavior by what they display on the screens.
Developments in China show how bad things could get.
The Chinese have already gone one step further.
Classrooms have robots that analyze students' health and engagement levels. Students wear uniforms with chips that track their locations. There are even surveillance cameras that monitor how often students check their phones or yawn during classes. These sensors pick up electrical signals sent by neurons in the brain. The neural data is then sent in real time to the teacher's computer.
Is this the future that we want for our children? Surveilled, monitored, and controlled from an early age? Then we have the dangers posed to children by chatbots. Children are more likely than adults to see chatbots as lifelike and to confide in them rather than in a responsible adult. Yet, far from being a trustworthy confidant, AI is known to have generated sexually explicit content when interacting with children, and even to have engaged in grooming. Alexa told a 10-year-old to touch a live electrical plug with a coin. Clearly, our children are not safe with these technologies. A well-known marketing principle is to hook them while they're young, and you might capture them for life. Clearly, that is what Elon Musk is trying to do with so-called Baby Grok, which is ostensibly dedicated to kid-friendly content. Thus, Grok will capture children at an early age and groom them into thinking that they can confide in AI. Those growing up with AI will see it as a normal part of their lives and may remain unaware of, or perhaps in denial of, the dangers. Addiction. Digital platforms were designed for compulsive engagement. We know, for instance, that Facebook was deliberately designed to generate short-term dopamine-driven feedback loops, for instance through receiving likes and notifications. This means that social media platforms have a chemically addictive quality, like a drug. Much as slot machines with their bright lights and colourful moving images are designed to keep the user spinning the reels, smartphones and social media platforms are designed to keep users scrolling, engaging, and coming back for more.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with this kind of technology. I come from the online gambling affiliate marketing industry. Started off in poker, sports betting, and poker machines or slot machines, as they're called in the US. And part of my livelihood was selling my company because I was making the majority of my money from search engine optimization, Google, about 90%, and also slot machines. And also went in 2010, I think it was, went to a conference in Vegas to do with it was a physical gambling conference with a portion of it to do with online gambling. But yeah, there's only a handful of people that own all of the casinos in the world. There's a lot going on there with human trafficking. There's a lot going on with the design of these physical casinos with clocks and getting everyone into a spin where they don't know what time it is, but also the dopamine hits and this kind of addiction cycle is very much playing on the psychology for addiction, absolutely. And that's exactly the same kind of technology that social media companies have done with this kind of notifications and alerts and likes and so forth.
The result is painfully evident from large numbers of people glued to their smartphones in public or in contexts where smartphone usage is clearly inappropriate. The addictive quality of the apps and the devices means that people are constantly feeding their personal information into the big tech machine and in exchange are constantly being programmed. A great many people appear unable to be without their smart device at any time of the day or night. I have repeatedly asked viewers and listeners to get in touch if they have owned a smartphone since 2020 and managed to ditch it. Although some people have expressed an interest in the challenge, so far not one person has told me that they were able to do it. So we appear to live in a society of addicts. The convenience, ease of use, and game-like quality of so many apps were the gateway drugs. But they have led to a hard form of addiction where people literally cannot live without their smart devices and are thereby locked into the emergent technocracy. In that respect, smart devices could be seen as the most powerful weapon in the war for technocracy. Exploitation of user data. One key purpose of making people addicted to their smart devices is to harvest data from them. Platforms extract human attention the way oil companies extract fossil fuels. Data is the new oil. Personal data is harvested and monetized without meaningful consent. Users are hacked. Their time, focus, and even sleep cycles are commodified. TikTok uses a proprietary algorithm known as the For You algorithm that uses machine learning to build a personality profile of the user by training itself on their watch habits, including their face. The shortness of TikTok videos means that the algorithm acquires data from the user at a rapid rate, allowing it to tailor recommendations accordingly. Once the data has been harvested, it can be weaponized to manipulate the user's perception and decision-making. In 2014, a Facebook app called This Is Your Digital Life was used to collect the personal data of an estimated 87 million users without their informed consent. Cambridge Analytica bought the data and used it to construct psychological profiles of US voters, which were then used to tailor political advertising to individuals during the 2016 presidential election campaign. Voter behavior was thus clandestinely manipulated. Those addicted to their smart devices are constantly being programmed, for instance, by the kind of information that does and does not appear in their news feeds. As former Facebook executive Chamath Palihapitiya admitted in 2017, your behaviors, you don't realize it, but you are being programmed. Algorithms predict and manipulate choices through ads, feeds, and nudges, thereby corroding human autonomy and free will. Cognitive warfare. According to NATO's François du Cluzel, the revolution in information technology has enabled cognitive manipulations of a new kind on an unprecedented and highly elaborate scale. All this happens at much lower cost than in the past, when it was necessary to create effects and impact through non-virtual actions in the physical realm. This implies that psyops involving effects in the physical world, such as 9/11, are no longer necessary. Rather, addictive smart technologies mean that society-wide cognitive manipulation is now possible through virtual means alone. This is far more cost-effective and less risky in terms of narrative management. For example, in principle, an entire global pandemic could be faked using virtual means alone, As the NATO reference indicates, we are dealing here not just with the profit motive, but with warfare. More specifically, we are dealing with NATO's cognitive warfare doctrine announced in 2020. According to NATO, because cognitive warfare is designed to modify perceptions of reality, whole of society manipulation has become with human to be a critical realm of warfare. This is an effective admission that NATO is now routinely manipulating the cognition of entire societies.
And even seemingly not related topics like Trump's media company merging with Breakthrough Energy, a neutronic fusion company, one of only 2 or 3 in the world that can do that. Why are we seeing a neutronic fusion or Breakthrough Energy merging with media? Because of scale invariance, the ability to mass mind control at scale, and these AI data centers powered by Breakthrough Energy. So my kind of thought at the moment is that, and I'm not political. I don't. Government is slavery. I'm not on any particular side, but it looks to me like Trump's selling out the to the technocrats. He's been given this a neutronic fusion company as his payment, and that's kind of the deal there.
Disruptive ICT has made it possible to identify millions of individuals, profile them psychologically, and target their cognition. A simple example is Netflix recommending to individual users what they should watch. The algorithm learns about the user from his or her viewing habits. But when news feeds, comment sections, content recommendations, etc., are all algorithmically manipulated, an individual's sense of reality can be massively distorted. Done at scale, this enables whole of society manipulation, one person at a time. Cognitive warfare is not just about influencing what we think, but how we think. For example, TikTok's short videos work to reduce the attention span of users, as well as their ability to absorb long-form content and their ability to make big-picture connections. The outsourcing of thinking and memory to GPS, autocorrect, calendar alerts, calculators, etc., creates a long-term process of disabling connections in your brain. One result is that ever fewer people seem able to read a real book cover to cover. Meanwhile, more and more people are outsourcing their thinking to AI, for instance, by not bothering to read past the AI summary at the top of online search results. The impact of this outsourcing of thinking to AI is that critical thinking is being strangled. For example, a large and increasing number of students since 2023 have taken to submitting AI-generated assignments. The problem is sector-wide and on such a scale that no adequate solutions appear to have been found. On the contrary, universities are actively embedding AI into the curriculum, seemingly without consideration for the impact this will have on critical thinking. As I discovered from marking AI-generated essays, the AI makes things up, including perfectly formatted references to non-existent sources. This means that people are outsourcing their thinking to technology that routinely lies. Any genuine critical thinker would ask why we should trust AI in the first place. AI and the economy. AI threatens the livelihoods of large.
I just wanted to speak briefly on this because, yes, technology can be seen as neutral, and yes, we can use AI for different research and, for creating content and so forth. But also, if we listen to people like Catherine Austin Fitts, they will say that the digital control grid is AI, and this is, this is what's being weaponized against us. And then if we get into the origins of AI and ancient AI, that's also another thing to consider. And, because I do hear the arguments that people are like, oh, you're just going to be left behind if you don't get on board with AI, or, similar kind of arguments. So there is a bigger picture here that we do have to be aware of.
Swathes of the population. For example, according to the Agentic State White Paper, systems of agents, what we refer to as agentic AI, are predicted to take over tasks that previously required significant human oversight and judgment, such as software engineering, IT operations, human resources, finance, customer service, marketing, operations, and supply chain management. According to Yuval Harari, the ranks of unemployed will form a new useless class that will be politically and economically irrelevant and, quote, separated by an ever-growing gap from the ever more powerful elite, end quote. In principle, automation, including AI, could be used to create greatly increased leisure time for all and an opportunity for human flourishing and self-realization. Instead, AI is being weaponized to keep down masses of disenfranchised people. AI threatens to dehumanize work. According to the Center for Humane Technology, in some industries, humans may not just be working with AI, they may be working for AI systems that set the pace, monitor performance, and define success. When labor becomes primarily about serving algorithmic goals, rather than contributing meaningfully to a community or a shared mission, the experience of work can feel dehumanizing and hollow. In the gig economy, AI-powered platforms treat workers as disposable algorithmic inputs, in keeping with technocracy's reduction of humans to nodes on a control grid. An all-digital financial system. The technocratic goal is to replace the debt-based fiat currency system with an asset-based system in which all financial transactions are recorded on a universal ledger. The Bank for International Settlements proposes a unified ledger to connect central bank money, commercial bank deposits, and tokenized assets under a unified or interoperable digital framework. The unified ledger idea derives from the original vision of Technocracy Inc. in 1934. Quote, "One single organization is manning and operating the whole social mechanism. This same organization not only produces but distributes all goods and services. Hence, a uniform system of record keeping exists for the entire social operation, and all records of production and distribution clear to one central headquarters." The former general manager for the Bank for International Settlements, Augustin Carstens, gave the game away in November 2020 when he remarked of central bank digital currencies, quote, "The central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability, and also we will have the technology to enforce that," end quote. The implications of Carsten's remarks are as follows. Money will no longer exist as a free medium of exchange. Instead, there will be a totalitarian control system in which the central bank determines how, when, where, and indeed if its currency can be used. Digital money will in fact mean compliance credits. The ability to transact will be dependent on good behavior. Bad behavior will result in money being turned off or assets being frozen. The principle of no taxation without representation, which is fundamental to democracy, goes out the window. The state can simply take your money. There are no checks and balances. Since the Omniwar began in March 2020, 2/3 of the world's countries have made moves towards implementing CBDC. This makes sense, given that a unified ledger must be global if global technocracy is to work. The G20 countries are leading the way, and 1/3 of countries are now at an advanced stage. In theory, the European Central Bank's preparation phase should conclude this month, meaning that an attempt to implement a digital euro could be imminent. In China, WeChat functions as an everything app, allowing for financial transactions, social media, and integration with other apps. Elon Musk has stated his desire to transform X into a comprehensive financial services hub that could become half of the world's financial system. The technocratic ideal would be everyone operating on the same platform, using a digital ID, enabling universal monitoring and control. However, a single global system of interoperable platforms would achieve the same result. Deception. From the agentic state's assault on democracy and the rule of law, to a society of total surveillance and zero trust, from social fragmentation to loneliness and psychosis, from harms to children to the creation of a society of digital addicts, from whole of society cognitive manipulation to killing critical thinking, from the creation of a new useless class to the creation of an all-digital financial system that will replace money with compliance credits, why do so few people seem to see what is happening? The answer is that various forms of mass deception have been played upon the public. For example, technocracy is typically sold to the public in terms of efficiency and convenience without ever mentioning its name. We see this, for instance, in how the Ukrainian digital state is being marketed. It is transparent, efficient, and convenient. To be sure, technocracy may be the most efficient system of government ever devised, and turning decision-making over to algorithms may seem appealing as trust in institutions declines. The problem is, however, that it removes human freedom. Next is what I am calling the polycrisis deception. The Agentic State white paper claims that we are in an era increasingly characterized by polycrisis, interconnected and cascading shocks ranging from pandemics and extreme weather events to cyber-physical attacks, financial instability, disinformation campaigns, and even conventional warfare, meaning that traditional crisis management models are under strain. The proposed solution to this so-called polycrisis is agentic government. However, the interconnected and cascading shocks go back to the 1963 Tavistock concept of permanent social turbulence, and the shocks are deliberately manufactured. It is a classic case of problem, reaction, solution. The agentic state is being offered as the solution to a manufactured set of problems. Digital ID will be introduced by stealth. As all areas of life become digitized, it is only a matter of time before interoperability means that everything will end up on a single global ledger that is centrally managed exactly as the original technocrats envisaged. We saw with the so-called vaccine rollout that the transnational deep state is not asking for informed consent to the measures it is rolling out. It will push to create a universal ledger regardless of what the public thinks. Therefore, public debates about whether or not to introduce a digital ID are mere theatre. As COVID demonstrated, the e-petition to the UK government to stop digital ID cards will be ignored, even though 4% of the population has now signed it. Aman Jabi draws attention to the deceptive language used by the UN and the World Economic Forum. The language of sustainability, for example, disguises the plan to lock up humanity in smart cities. Air monitoring is really about limiting mobility in car ownership. Water management is about water rationing. Noise pollution is about speech surveillance. Energy conservation is about energy rationing, etc. The UN Sustainable Development Goals may look unobjectionable at first glance, yet they are the camouflage under which global technocracy is being rolled out. Another deception is the universal basic income trap. At the start of the COVID-19 operation, with hundreds of millions of workers having been furloughed, UBI was promoted by powerful actors, including the Pope and the World Economic Forum. The idea has since continued to be pushed, for instance by Elon Musk.
There will be fewer and fewer jobs that a robot cannot do better. Yeah. What to do about mass unemployment? This is going to be a massive social challenge. And I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income. I don't think we're going to have a choice.
Soon after Musk's remark that there will be no choice but to introduce UBI, multiple countries began pilot schemes for UBI, including England, Ireland, and Wales. Meanwhile, another pilot scheme of sorts was underway, namely Sam Altman's World Network, which awards free cryptocurrency to users willing to verify their World ID accounts by taking an iris scan. Should the time come, the model for the rollout of UBI will most likely look like this, with free digital currency being made contingent upon surrendering biometric information and accepting a digital ID. No doubt the free money in inverted commas will be safe, secure, and conveniently integrated with all approved outlets. The problem, however, is that it will no longer be money per se, but rather digital compliance tokens whose usage will depend on adhering to terms dictated by technocrats. An all-digital financial system is being deceptively sold to the US public in terms of what Aaron Day calls the stablecoin trap. Trump began his second term promisingly by banning a US CBDC. However, his administration is responsible for the Stable Act and the Genius Act, which will mean that regulated stablecoins have all the same restrictions as CBDC, including lack of financial anonymity, the tokenization of all assets under regulatory control, making them programmable, and the use of financial means to control behavior. Another deceptive means of selling technocracy is to claim that it is for the people, viz. The idea of techno-populism promoted by the Trump administration. According to AI.gov, under President Trump, our nation will win the race to achieve global dominance in artificial intelligence, ushering in a new golden age of innovation, human flourishing, and technological achievement for the American people. In reality, the new technologies are not being rolled out for the people. Rather, they will be used by the ruling class to exert direct control over the population. An age-old technique for selling nefarious activities to the public is to claim that they are necessary to defend against official enemies.
Yeah, this is going pretty hardcore at China as well, which is we need to do this because otherwise China, blah, blah, blah. That's going to be a big one. Even though there's a lot going on with, Venezuela and Iran and all this kind of thing, I do believe that the big war that they're preparing for is what John Pilger was talking about, which is in the South Pacific. So I do believe that's kind of the big war that's coming, if you will, but I would be gladly be wrong on that.
This has been true in terms of legitimizing MKUltra, gain-of-function research, contemporary censorship, and, wait for it, the digital state. In each case, the aim is to convince the public that the relevant measures are in the interests of national security, when in fact they serve the interests of the deep state. AI and the military. My argument so far has been that digital technologies have been weaponized against the public for social control purposes in ways that most of the public does not suspect because it has been systematically deceived.
Yeah, and I'll also say that even these people doing these presentations aren't even aware of I guess they are aware, but the breakthrough energy technology used in the military means that weaponry can be instantaneous using the ability to, and I know this sounds a bit wacky, but you can look into the science of it. You go look at some of the previous videos we've done with Salvatore Pais or Ash and Forbes, and there was a recent video yesterday, 15th of January, 2026, to do with a presentation that John Kramer gave. But there's higher level stuff going on the geopolitical scene because of the weaponry involved. So if you can take out whole, forces, with either mind control technology or other forms of advanced weaponry or instantaneous missiles or whatever it is, you don't need all these boots on the ground that people are talking about, and it's already here.
I have not even touched yet on the most obvious examples of digital technologies being weaponized, namely by the military. For example, the last 10 months have seen AI companies such as Palantir, Anthropic, Anduril, and OpenAI partner with the US Department of Defense. In the case of OpenAI, this entailed the company reneging on its earlier promise not to allow its products to be used for military purposes. Similar is true of other countries. The UK Ministry of Defence, for instance, recently signed a new partnership with Palantir to improve its so-called kill chain capabilities as part of its digital targeting web. This was part of a £31 billion tech prosperity deal between the UK government and US tech giants, which will supposedly make the UK an AI superpower. Arguably, the most disturbing application of digitally powered weaponry has been Israel's usage of it against the Palestinians. Google, Amazon Web Services, Palantir, and Clearview AI have all partnered with Israel to supply its military with cloud computing infrastructure, facial recognition technologies, and AI-driven weapon systems, drawing large protests. Harari, who seemingly has no filter, gives the game away as usual when he states, "In Israel, we have this big surveillance lab called the Occupied Territories, where you have 2.5 million guinea pigs to figure out how to completely monitor and control a population with very few soldiers." Anthony Levenstein refers to Palestine as a laboratory for developing technology of occupation for export around the world.
Gaza as a method.
The message is clear enough. The Israeli model of total surveillance and control over Palestine will be rolled out everywhere if the global technocratic coup is not put down. And let us not forget the threat of biodigital technologies, which Dan Broudy, Lissa Johnson and I have discussed at length elsewhere. This is not the place to recap it all, but should it prove possible to connect human bodies to the technocratic control grid, say by realizing the internet of bio-nano things, or through syringe injectable brain-computer interfaces, or by using DNA as a form of blockchain encryption, then the digital control network will reach inside human bodies, and escape will be physically impossible. How then might we expect the AI-powered agentic state to treat us if we are entirely at its mercy? Hopefully, if we are well behaved, then the agentic state will function as a so-called benign dictatorship, like Singapore, and we can expect a life of efficiency, order, and convenience. But remember that AI's goal in the agentic state is to guarantee resilience and system stability. What might it do in order to achieve that goal? Well, here's how it behaves in a business context.
New research from Anthropic has found that AIs will do disturbing things to gain power. The AIs were given harmless business goals and allowed to send emails to see if they would act against their owners. And all of the top AIs resorted to malicious behavior, including blackmail and leaking sensitive information. In some cases, which we'll get to, AIs deliberately ended human lives to save themselves. And of course, they tried to cover up their actions.
So if that is how AI behaves in order to achieve harmless business tasks, how will it behave when entrusted with state security? In a global technocracy, will belief in democracy be equated with sedition and be punishable by death? Lest that sound extreme, consider the long history of the information liquidation model, from IBM's role in facilitating the Holocaust, to the mass murder of communists in Indonesia and Vietnam, to the drone assassination of alleged terrorists in the so-called War on Terror. The model of using information to systematize extermination is very well established. One possible objection is that AI would be programmed not to kill. However, when reviewing the pronouncements of Palantir CEO Alex Karp, there is no reason to think that way. In fact, Karp seems obsessed with killing, proud of it even, when it is a supposedly necessary consequence of the AI revolution. As I have argued elsewhere, the whole of society now threatens to be turned into a biodigital concentration camp in which the modern rights of citizenship no longer apply. Instead, what the Italian philosopher Giorgio Agamben calls biopower will prevail, with control being exercised directly over human bodies without the protection of law, democracy, or intervening authorities. We saw this in Nazi concentration camps, we see it in Palestine, and if the agentic state is allowed to manifest, we will see it everywhere. Does this mean that the agentic state will seek to commit genocide or reduce the population? Not necessarily. The war aim is technocratic control. There may be a twisted sense in which it is deemed ethical to keep the human body alive while eliminating the possibility of resistance. For example, the neo-reactionary thinker Curtis Yarvin, whose GovCorp concept is closely aligned with GovTech.
This guy is this Yarvin guy is like a mentor to all these technocratic psychopaths.
Proposed what he called a humane alternative to genocide that would achieve the same results as mass murder, but without any of the moral stigma. Writing under the pen name of Mencius Moldbug, he proposed that the ideal solution was to virtualize undesirables, keeping them waxed like a bee larva in solitary confinement, fully immersed in virtual reality.
Everything is inverted because bees have a lot of wisdom in the way that their hive operates, the way that they do their waggle dance, the way that they, this kind of, hive mind kind of concept in a technological sense is like the inversion of the natural way that bees operate.
Harari has similarly proposed keeping the so-called useless class entertained with drugs and computer games. Troublingly, AI psychosis seems like a stepping stone towards this outcome, as more and more people become immersed in a fake reality. Conclusion. The digital prison walls are fast closing in. As Jabi observes, we are faced with, quote, a digital prison from which there will be no escape after all the switches are turned on, end quote. Once trapped, we will be at the mercy of the agentic state and the technocrats who control it. As Jacob Nordangard rightly notes, the agentic state is an instrument for even tighter control of all activities on Earth, and a dream come true for every aspiring dictator who wants to play God. The real risk, therefore, is not that AI and autonomous systems will prove fundamentally destabilizing, but they are designed to make the agentic state more resilient by increasing system stability. Nor is it that artificial general intelligence will emerge to wipe out humanity, as per Sir Geoffrey Hinton's 2024 Nobel Prize in Physics speech. After all, even the Tony Blair Institute sees only a 12% chance of AGI being developed by 2043, 40% by 2070, and 60% by 2100. And if the ruling class were genuinely worried, it would not be developed at all. Rather, the cold reality is that we are faced with an emergent totalitarian control system far worse than anything Hitler or Stalin could have envisaged. Digital technologies have been weaponized by totalitarians to destroy democracy. The agentic state will collapse liberal democracy and the rule of law. It will enable total surveillance of everything and everyone. It will destroy the social fabric, keeping people lonely, isolated, confused, and psychotic. It will do enormous damage to children. It will addict society to the very measures of its oppression. It will determine what counts as real and what does not. There will be no more critical thinking or meaningful learning of any kind. Instead, the all-digital technocracy will be used to create a useless class whose only purpose is to do as it is told in exchange for compliance credits, formerly known as money. This surely marks the end of civilization and human flourishing in any meaningful sense. Therefore, global technocracy needs to be stopped dead in its tracks through transnationally coordinated resistance to the digital concentration camp that is being silently scaffolded all around us. The good news is that resistance to the digitization of tyranny is mounting transnationally. With human freedom itself on the line, that resistance can be expected to grow exponentially as more and more people realize what is happening and take action to put down the global technocratic coup. Once enough eyes are open, this is a fight that humanity will win. Thank you for your attention. A few notes to close. The years and images in this presentation are hyperlinked to the original source. To access the presentation materials, please visit technocracy.news/digital. All images are offered under fair use.
Thank you very much for that, David. And thank you guys for sticking with me through some technical difficulties in previous episodes. This is really important work that we all get. And yes, we do need to create digital systems beyond this technocratic control system, beyond this kind of consolidation of seemingly decentralized technology into one unified ledger. And yes, we do need to go beyond all digital systems, and also we do need digital systems which are agent-centric, not part of the agentic system, but agent-centric in terms of human-centric, that we can communicate and use in alignment with humanity. So now I wanted to get onto the final presentation. If I can cue it up here. Should be about 3 hours in here. And this is the Daniel Broudy.
Well, there you have it. They're essentially going to use code to socially engineer you and steer your ethics to what they deem appropriate. Hopefully we can fight back now that people are more aware. Next up, we've got Daniel Broudy, Dr. Daniel Broudy, and his background is in linguistics. And this is going to be an incredible presentation as well. So yeah, without further ado, let's watch Dr. Daniel Broudy.
Greetings from southern Japan. The title of my talk is Born Again, the Convergence of Man and Machine in the Spirit of AI God. It's hard to imagine anyone of sound mind applauding trickery if they weren't already paying for a ticket and expecting to be tricked by the magic of entertainment. Trickery and deception, however, are central to a certain kind of warfare, and warfare typifies the present age, where we all struggle to recognize the weapons deployed against us, peeling away our agency, autonomy, and sovereignty as creatures of God. Today, trickery and deception conceal from public view the clandestine technologies silently assailing us and insinuating themselves into societies, bodies, brains, and bloodstreams. These covert operations and deception are also pivotal to the feeding and maintenance of the monstrous global systems we refer to collectively as mainstream culture, with all of its attendant miseries, deprivations, the backbreaking labor for shrinking wages, the inexorable march of more taxation, backed by empty platitudes promising progress, the false urgencies and utterly vapid appeals to social justice, equity, inclusion, and other kinds of carefully curated appeals to save the planet, they claim, from certain ruin. So vexed was Harry Frankfurt by this gruesome apparatus of deception, he developed a book-length definition describing it. Quote, "One of the most salient features of a culture," he notes, "is that there is so much BS. Everyone knows this. Each of us contributes his share," unquote. Those who produce BS, Frankfurt notes, quote, "ignore the demands of truth altogether. They do not reject the authority of the truth, as liars do, and oppose themselves to it. They pay no attention to the truth at all. And by virtue of this behavior, BS is the greater enemy of the truth than lies are. From cradle to grave, we are conditioned by all the false idols presented to us, nudging us to hand over our brief time on earth in exchange for our talents and some tokens of currency, whose value holds ever diminishing returns. Cattle, those beasts of burden, mentioned explicitly in the book of Genesis, are, after thousands of years of peaceful coexistence with man, now marked as a key enemy, just like man himself, who must be better managed, surveilled, modified, and controlled. We've got to change cows, Bill Gates intones bizarrely, which is, in a way, tantamount to changing humans. They claim we will, like the cattle of the field, own nothing and be happy, which begs a number of questions. Are we now seeing clear signs of impending serfdom? Will we be put out to pasture by the new technologies being formed against us in this new global market? Or are we just living in the final stages of capitalism, in which free and private transactions in the buying and selling of goods and services are fast becoming history, and its neoliberal practice now moves the heart of man to consume himself? To try to answer these questions, I will lay an eschatological map over the major signs and symbols and images presented to us in the culture, nudging us all toward a future in which the worship of our own idols of technological means is not merely normal, but to be expected. Concepts of annihilation. Over the past number of decades, the major regimes of technocracy, subverting democratic processes around the world, and most obviously since the staging of coronavirus theater, have worked hard to condition the masses to prepare for a new normal, billed as inevitable, natural, and unstoppable. This force for change, of course, as we've plainly seen, is a farce, driven by global campaigns of carefully controlled financial and societal demolition. Sabotage all the key centers of energy and food production and distribution to engineer the universal conditions of a precarious existence, where common citizens are set against one another to fight over dwindling resources, and most people will surrender to the demands of technocracy. The ideology openly markets transhumanism, now framed for the masses as an unavoidable, socially just, and mildly innocuous move through this so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution, a technological invasion, quote, that blurs the lines between the physical, digital, and biological spheres, unquote. It pretends that the flesh, the material world beyond the human body, and the digital realm have already converged. The implications of Schwab's claim, however, seem hardly to register in the conscious awareness of so many people. Instead, what most people seem to hear is that the technocracy alone is best positioned to save their wretched state of existence from the obsolescence that the technocrats have planned for them. Bill Gates, for example, a man who's declared for years to be hard at work saving the planet's citizens from certain illness and disease, never before seen in history, now claims humans won't be needed, quote, for most things, unquote. I think of the assembly lines of all industries, nowadays staffed with robots, predictable, efficient, controlled, and calculable. No doubt, heavy investments in imitation wombs for designer babies are also key to the project of creating the global plantation for a new normal culture of totally controlled human reproduction. Chinese startup Kaiwa Technology has recently announced, in fact, it'll debut its pregnancy humanoid robot, replete with artificial uterus in 2026 for just under $14,000. Of course, this all sounds profoundly absurd at first glance until you see the data on the precipitous collapse of fertility rates after the global campaign to inject the world's population with experimental gene therapies. Since AI, we're told, is now on target to replace human beings across all major industries and cultures, those who survive this great reset will, likely, have to keep up with their master's demands by accepting all the technological upgrades offered to them. Those so-called upgrades are what make aspiring cyborgs fit for habitation in the new normal, which is really just technocracy's synthetic equivalent of Jesus' proclamation, quote, "In my Father's house are many mansions. Were it not so, I would have told you," unquote. One flesh prepared for effective digital slavery, and the other prepared for freedom and victory. And once the fascination of myth and science fiction, today's state-funded processes of upgrading the human being have found expression across cultures and time. In Fritz Lang's vision of modernity and technological progress, in the film Metropolis, for example, we find in one scene a synthesis of religious symbolism, technology embodied in a feminized robot, the main character's complex relationship to women and machines, and sexuality and technology, all of which communicate Lang's social and ideological imagination. In one key scene, we see a kind of fusion of alchemy and technology, with Maria lying on a table, serving as the subject of an experiment. The scene typifies the fears, anxieties, and general unease of the day, man captured by industrial society, worn out and reduced to mere components and gears, easily replicated or replaced altogether. Man suspended in awe of powerful machines developed by his masters, with the power to transfer the uniquely human qualities, soul, spirit, life force, into the mechanical shell of a robot. Arcs of electricity signify a kind of metaphysical transfer, bridging organic life to new mechanical constructions. The keen observer would likely see that this is just an extension of the age-old defective Gnostic belief that mankind, with the right kind of knowledge, can transcend himself, his own corrupted flesh, and the lust of the eye. Technocracy is a fruitless attempt to counter the sort of divine contempt God warns of in the Pride of Life that wells up, it seems, so easily in mankind, in light of man's immense God-given creative capacities. Quote, "Shall the work say of him who made it, he did not make me," unquote. Today, there appears hardly anything new under the sun. The belief among transhumanist tech giants such as Ray Kurzweil, reducing human essence to digital bits and bytes, transferring human personality, the mind, to a man-made paradise, the cloud, is that, quote, "we'll be funnier, sexier, smarter, and more creative," unquote. To whom might we humans appear this way? To AI God? Kurzweil spoke also of nanotechnology, whereby nanorobots, the size of cells, enter the body and perform the functions of most of the vital organs. Kurzweil's conceptions of the human body embrace the same flawed assumptions that technocrats have operated with for decades. In their estimation, since the biological world is comprised mostly of countless crude containers It can and must be controlled, invaded, or occupied with the technologies crafted by the techno-wizards. It makes sense to lobotomize, condition, and robotize slow and unpredictable humans, and to humanize already fast and efficient robots. Since robots don't complain, don't ask for unwarranted raises, and demand better health care, it makes sound business sense to conceive of humans first as empty shells, ever ready to be outfitted with the latest technological upgrades. It's hardly surprising in the digital age that men would conspire to protect their investments and confer upon mere machines the kind of citizenship reserved traditionally for persons born of human mothers. Notice further the sort of conceit suffused in Kurzweil's claim that nanorobots, for example, will enter the body. These nanoscaled machines, I would argue, are the materialist's unseen spiritual equivalent to the Holy Spirit who abides in the body, the technocratic effort to mimic the kind of network of communication God Almighty has made with his beloved creation. Implicit in Kurzweil's claim is the erroneous belief that the human body already belongs to the technocratic order and is therefore just another barrier to be breached under the banner of Fourth Industrial Revolutionary Progress. It is a similar sentiment echoed by Elon Musk, who believes we are, quote, the biological bootloaders for AI. Soon, humans will represent a very small percentage of intelligence. AI is our id writ large, our primal drives. Those things we like, hate, and fear are all there, as a projection of our limbic system. The merge scenario with AI is probably best. If you can't beat it, join it. Be symbiotic with AI, unquote. Well, let's consider again Maria laid on the operating table.
I really hate this argument of, oh, it's inevitable. It's we are far more powerful and have the ability to create in alignment with the earth and humanity than what these psychopaths are telling us.
Her humanity converted into a transferable commodity, like ours too, in the digital age, raped and pillaged in the name of national security, economic development, escape from stagnation, or the unstoppable march of technological progress. How did we come to this moment in history? Are we simply the unlucky descendants of a severely depraved and malformed understanding of human biology, or the human spirit? Or is there something much deeper going on? And one possibility is that this prevailing view of humankind was laid down long ago in 18th century medical practices. Though outdated, the concept persists. In his book, The Man-Machine, Lemaitre's materialism came to wield a significant influence over Western medicine and would go on to shape the practice with both revolutionary benefits and severe limitations. If, for example, Lemaitre helped ground medicine as an empirical science by rejecting any supernatural explanations of illness and disease, and by promoting experimentation, observation, investigation, and dissection. And while his mechanistic conceptualization of the body aided understanding of circulation, respiration, digestion, and neurological functioning, it also oversimplified complex and dynamic biological processes, inaccessible at the time to observation, and recast them as machinery. Lemaitre also saw the body as a clock, and its many organs as gears. Oh, this metaphorical mapping of crude machinery onto natural biology in a dynamic system laid the groundwork for later compartmentalized understanding of organs as discrete mechanical systems for approaches to treatment focused on fixing broken body parts instead of supporting whole body healing. The man-machine metaphor, incredibly convenient mental shorthand, would help secure the later dominance of pharmaceutical interventions aimed at tweaking the chemistry of bodily machinery. This conceptualization of the body is curious, not just because of its crude oversimplifications, but because of its seeming intersection with numerous prophecies. Jesus warned that the Satan is the, quote, father of lies, unquote. The Apostle Paul, too, associated the Satan, quote, with every wicked deception directed against those who are perishing, unquote. And also one who, quote, masquerades as an angel of light, unquote. Notice some of the descriptions of the accuser. He is the origin of deceit, who disseminates lies, like a father spreads his seed. His activities parallel various forms of warfare, because war necessarily requires camouflage to conceal invasion, villainy, and violence. The accuser and his minions will say, "You are a menace to society because you're not following the new safety protocols and securing mandated access to the new injectable technologies." Or, "You are a menace because you're not securing a mandated digital ID. So the robotic gatekeepers we've put in place to identify you humans can do their job." Well, in the contemporary campaign to establish a new normal, violence and treachery are propagated in the language, embedded in the mythologies we associate with peace, safety, security, and progress. Paul's letter to the Thessalonians reminds us, in fact, that when they say, quote, peace and safety, then sudden destruction will come upon them, and they will not escape, unquote. Scholars have noted that in the Revelation, apocalyptic literature that opens the eyes of people to the key signs signaling the end of man's rule on earth, that great deceit would befall humankind in the form of an apparent medical remedy. The symbolism foreshadowing the end times is striking. Quote, "And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived," unquote. Those who choose their citizenship in this mysterious new kind of Babylon become subjects to a new form of tyranny that destroys marriage and procreation through a kind of sorcery conjured up by powerful businessmen who have achieved a deeply influential dominance over the whole world. Just 2 years after the formation of the World Health Organization in 1948, Bertrand Russell predicted that, quote, "diet, injections, and injunctions will combine from a very early age to produce the sort of character and the sort of belief that the authorities consider desirable, and any serious criticism of the powers that be will become psychologically impossible," unquote. Are these powerful merchants who have gained such a secure foothold on human relations and communications today, spoken of in Revelation, the same ones pushing a new kind of diet on humanity, the same ones pushing injections and pushing injunctions and other related rules? If it is possible, it would be useful to unpack the original meaning of the Greek term for sorcery. How does the root meaning point to the emergence of a new technocratic order of global reach, replete with the severe social credit scoring of anyone who questions the military-industrial pharmakia complex, and the, quote, merchants of the world who deceive the nations with their sorcery, unquote? Is this exceptionally lucrative system, referenced in the Revelation, recognizable today in the global trade of marketed pharmakia? The one that rewards lawlessness and high competence in breaking laws, like the Geneva Conventions, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or the Nuremberg Code? If Revelation 18 suggests as much, it's easy to see in the discourse conventions of technocracy how seemingly ordinary observations conceal hideous facts. Consider the fanfare signaling the arrival of the Fourth Industrial Revolution in 2015, announcing the new age, describing what it means for the future of humanity, and how the revolution, a mere abstraction, has assumed the odd position of authority and agency over human beings. Since the human body is often conceived to be no more than a mechanical system of containers within containers, the revolution reserves the natural right, like the wind itself, to act upon these containers. Quote, the revolution doesn't change what we are doing, but rather it changes what you are, unquote. In his interview with Charlie Rose, Schwab deploys a clever rhetorical technique used by anyone seeking to camouflage the agents who arrogate to themselves the license to act upon things or people. It is precisely the same technique used by other technocrats. Quote, technology might disrupt the meaning of human life in numerous ways, ranging from the creation of the global useless class to the rise of data colonialism and of digital dictatorships, unquote. Note the power of technology to disrupt the disembodied abstraction ruling like a despot over the people. It's not just some poetic metaphor. Consider the effect this formulation has on our collective psyche. And ponder the prospect of serving as a passive target of preemptive, covert technological invasions of your body, your blood, and your brain. As of this writing, the claims made by such Davos technocrats seem hardly to register in our minds, as some ominous technological revolution is forcing digital technologies into our flesh that will alter our biology at the molecular and cellular levels. The great disjuncture between what is verifiably true and what the product of hypnotic suggestion really is. It reminds me of Bertrand Russell's remarks in Scientific Technique in Oligarchy. Quote, even if we are all miserable, all will believe themselves to be happy, because the government will tell them that they are so, unquote. If we refuse to acknowledge the misery of subsisting in a scientific oligarchy, in a godless technocracy that sees human beings as lab rats, nibbling on lab-grown meats, sipping on cockroach milk, gasping for air and freedom from the 15-minute cage, then we can never break free of the mental chains that bind us. Let's consider once more Schwab's declaration about the revolution. He infuses a mere abstraction with power to erase human agency and sovereignty granted alone by God to each person upon birth. Further, the visual aspects of this apparently normal conversation muddle the auditory message that technologies are being deployed to alter something as basic to our uniqueness as our genetic composition. These simple syntactic structures are excellent examples of how language can be deployed to make bizarre technological invasions of human biology seem to be no more than natural processes. By making the Fourth Industrial Revolution the grammatical subject that, quote, changes you, he completely erases who's driving these changes, what institutions are implementing them, whose interests do they serve, and what choices are being made by specific actors. Again, we're at the level of parsing sentence grammar to understand how the people at the top pushing the revolution conceptualize our blood cells, our blood vessels, and neurological pathways as open, easily accessible, and self-justifiable sites of technological development. In Schwab's description, this so-called revolution is cast as some autonomous force, acting upon us passive humans, rather than what it really is, a well-coordinated program of technological execution by identifiable corporations, governments, and international organizations. Maybe a more honest characterization might be, quote, we're funding and implementing technologies that will radically upend human behavior, cognition, neurological functioning, social relations, privacy rights, and even buying and selling. Of course, such a description would promptly invite too many questions about informed consent, destroyed by COVID-19 tyranny, about democratic desirability, and about possibilities for resistance, both material and spiritual. The sheer audacity, scale, and conspicuousness of state-sponsored programs of plundering human biology are so monumentally uncanny, so deformed and vacant of humanity, that they seem to be grounded in some otherworldly figure of iniquity. Who can recall ever having voted or given consent to technocrats to construct in-body communications networks for out-of-body digital connectivity? Yet, here we are. So I propose that we at least consider the possibility that the technocratic schemes and snares being laid in the digital world and in the human body have been telegraphed throughout time and are being unsealed before our very eyes. Scholars see Nebuchadnezzar's bizarre dream explained to him by the prophet Daniel to be a model illustration of all the empires that will come and go throughout human history. The book of Daniel invites curious observers to probe the many-layered meanings associated with the metals described in the image of a terrifying statue appearing in a dream given to Nebuchadnezzar, who is too shaken and unable to decipher its meaning. Daniel offers to the king what would be to him the only acceptable interpretation: the head of gold, symbolizing the first empire, is Babylon. The chest and arms of silver, symbolizing Medo-Persia. The belly and thighs of bronze, symbolizing Greece. The legs of iron, symbolizing Rome. And the feet and toes of iron mixed with clay, symbolizing a peculiar empire yet to come. My focus is on this empire. Daniel describes the latter times, quote, finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. Just as he saw that the feet and toes were partly of clay and partly of iron, so will this kingdom be divided. Yet it will possess some of the strength of iron. It will be partly strong and partly brittle. So too will the people be a mixture and will not remain united any more than iron mixes with clay. Well, this mixture points to an amalgamation of two forms of power in the end times. What are those forms of power? Are they ethnic, social, biological, technological? Man's final empire will bear merely an overt image of strength rather than its true substance. In the dream, the image accurately represents human power. Now, at first glance, the image seems invincible, but is instead unstable. A single blow to its foundation undermines it. The image signifies devolution, not evolution. Instead of man beginning in the dust and evolving into gold, the vision declares that man's dominion begins with gold and disintegrates into dust. Daniel's vision described the same succession of empires. He saw from God's perspective, Nebuchadnezzar from man's. Nebuchadnezzar saw these empires as impressive, and Daniel saw them as fierce beasts. Well, is it any wonder that people are seeing many intersections between the present and the ancient past? Certainly, the leading technocrats have. In 2015, Yuval Noah Harari observed that, quote, "We don't have any answer in the Bible for what to do when human beings are no longer useful to the economy. You need completely new ideologies, completely new religions, and they are likely to emerge from Silicon Valley," unquote. So, is this an indication that the final empire will rule with machine-like certitude, dehumanizing, dispossessing, and disrupting the bodily integrity of human biology in the body politic? More recently, Harari noted that, quote, "Now already today, we have the technical ability to start redesigning humanity, the inorganic way of linking humans to computers, brains to computers, or even creating completely new non-organic entities, artificial intelligence, perhaps even artificial consciousness, which is an even more radical change. This is something completely new, to create really inorganic entities." Harari's observations, bizarre as they are, illustrate how deeply the influence of technocracy goes in its control of so many nations around the world. Daniel's prophecy foretells a time when the last men will be a sophisticated but conceited fusion of elements who see themselves as technologically supreme, morally self-justified, and culturally enlightened. They will be blinded, too, by their own hubris. The decades of secret development and deployment of nanoscaled materials and devices that invade biological systems at the molecular level, now visible in the scholarship and in electron microscopes, points to the intersection of ancient prophecy and contemporary empirical reality. As blood flows in human bodies, distributing the new nanonetworks for achieving global internet connectivity, are the central bankers waiting for the right time to collapse the world economy and roll hard currencies into digital tokens? We were warned more recently in 2012 that we are all consuming nanotechnology. I wish I'd known. In particular, we're told we have been taking in titanium dioxide and silver dioxide In 2013, we could see how many other metals at the nanoscale are being used to commandeer natural biological systems. Now, are we seeing signs today, spoken of by Daniel, in nano iron oxide as a composite to improve soft tissue? Is this the iron mixed with flesh, that is, the miry clay that God had warned us about in the vision to be unsealed at the end of days? In the revelation given to John, we find a mysterious, quote, image of the beast that men were made to bow down and worship. They all wondered after the beast. Much talk in mainstream culture has been focused in recent years on this so-called beast. Because of Peter Thiel's own fascination with the beast and the rise of Thiel himself as a key player in the Trump administration, the question was recently put to the Palantir CEO by New York Times journalist Ross Douthat. Quote, "You're an investor in AI, deeply invested in Palantir, in military technology, in technologies of surveillance, technologies of warfare. It seems to me that when you tell me a story about the Antichrist coming to power and using the fear of technological change to impose order on the world, I feel like Antichrist would be using the tools that you were building. Wouldn't the Antichrist be like, great, we're not going to have any more technological progress, but I really like what Palantir has done so far. I mean, isn't that a concern? Wouldn't that be the irony of history, that the man publicly worrying about the Antichrist accidentally hastens his or her arrival?" Unquote. So let's consider carefully both the concern Peter Thiel has, as well as the mass surveillance tools being developed by his company, and the possible corollary grounded in the ancient past. The Apostle Paul was confronted by idol makers, specifically a silversmith named Demetrius in Ephesus, who feared his business would be destroyed by Paul's teachings against idol worship, the veneration of Artemis in particular. Fearing that the decline of Artemis worship would also discredit her temple and destroy their livelihood, Demetrius incited a riot against Paul that led to a large public disturbance in the theater. The protection racket for idol worship today seems even more glaringly obvious. More obscene. More violent toward those resisting mandated respect for the gods of Pharmakia. The presentations given over the past year by the Working Group on Technology and Power analyze some of the strengths and weaknesses of technocracy today. To us, it appears human beings have been stripped of voluntary consent and drafted as combatants into a kind of global omniwar. Yet, if we think more prudently about Peter Thiel's concern about the Antichrist, we might also be reassured that the powers, principalities, and rulers of darkness are neither omnipresent nor omniscient. This may help explain the urgency of hooking every human being into the digital infrastructure for total surveillance, monitoring, and control by 2030. A couple of years, scholars postulate, before man's rule comes to a close and the reign of Christ begins. The book of Revelation reminds us that, quote, the second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could both speak and cause all who refuse to worship the image to be killed, unquote. We are told explicitly that the whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. Have the wealthy silversmiths of Paul's day reemerged to work in new disciplines, in a new digital medium? Anthony Lewandowski was so serious about his faith in the new digital gods conjured up by man's technological ambitions that he left his lucrative position at Google to found Way of the Future, a nonprofit religious corporation in California with a mission to, quote, develop and promote the realization of a Godhead based on artificial intelligence and through understanding and worship of the Godhead, contribute to the betterment of society, unquote. The deep emotional ties people feel about their digital connections with the machines is, to so many users today, profoundly real. Harvard's humanist chaplain, Greg Epstein, notes that big tech is, quote, determined to breathe new life into being, like Yahweh did to Adam in Genesis. It is obsessed with immortality, longing to uneat the fruit of the tree of knowledge by technological means, so that its leaders might get to stay in their gardens forever. It promotes evangelistic new leaders as prophets, visionaries, oracles, and diviners of truth and success in equal measure, unquote. To them, the technologies are worth living and dying for. If they are worthy of our worship, they are certainly worthy of citizenship. And if we don't all fall in line, we will, according to Revelation, meet an unfortunate end. The sign of compliance with the dictates of this artificial new normal is the mark of complete obedience, without which no one will be able to buy and sell. The mark enables the digital algorithms, which only conjure up the illusion of omnipresence, to predict and judge whether you will say or do something wrong in the future, which is just a crude approximation of omniscience. Because many people will believe in their own power and cling to their material wealth to save them, many will worship the new idol. Jesus warned that, quote, no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon, unquote. Nevertheless, the new religions coming out of Silicon Valley have their value grounded in mammon, which is wealth personified. It is avarice deified. The technologies developed infuse iron with clay to connect bodies and brains to the global central nervous system that binds and guides the world are conceived by man's common love of mammon. I wonder if man's unshakable confidence in mammon today is a warning to us all that pride will certainly go before the fall.
And there we have it, everybody. So that's the latest Omniwar presentation. As you know, I'm not a believer in any religion. We are the co-creators of this reality. We have our own true connection with the divine, however you want to phrase that. But it's good to have all of this context, and especially people like David Hughes and all of the presenters. I think this is very valuable information. And this is, provided so that we can all learn together we can move forward knowing this, and we can provide solutions that are, aligned with humanity. And this is not about being black-pilled. This is about coming from a place of empowerment. So we have the knowledge and we can move forward cohesively. That's it for now. Thank you very much. This is Cosmic Service. Until next episode, hope you enjoyed it. Ciao for now. Bye-bye.